Good evening and welcome to the 85th Annual Overseas Press Club event. Please welcome Scott Kraft, the President of Overseas Press Club of America.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the annual awards ceremony for the Overseas Press Club of America. Thank you for joining us to celebrate the finest international reporting from 2023. An evening when we recognize excellence in storytelling and craft, but also pay tribute to the courage, resilience, and commitment that journalists make day after day to report the truth. My name is Scott Kraft, and it's been my honor to serve as president of the OPC this year. I owe a personal debt to the journalism leaders on the Board of Governors who are responsible for the success of this evening and all of this organization's work. This is the 85th time the OPC has gathered to bestow awards for international journalism. 7 men and 2 women gathered at the Algonquin Hotel in 1939 on an April day, not unlike today, to create the OPC. They were American foreign correspondents and veterans of the biggest global stories of the era. And as they met, the world was on edge. Adolf Hitler had created a totalitarian state in Germany and would, in fact, invade Poland just 5 months later. Japan was pushing for economic control of East Asia. In Italy, Mussolini was seeking to expand his empire into Africa. Our founders wanted to create a kind of salon for them and colleagues returning from abroad, often from very dangerous parts of the world. And the club would be a safe space to swap war stories, to share information, and it must be said, down gallons of whiskey. Some things haven't changed. They were writers, photographers, and broadcasters. In the early days, they included Lowell Thomas and Edward R. Murrow, but also journalists like Dorothy Thompson, who had been expelled by the Gestapo and was writing a column called On the Road, which was read by 10 million people in the United States. They had a shared passion for the work of reporting from abroad for an American audience. Of course, it isn't hard to find parallels between the world that our founders were covering in 1939 and the world we cover today. But the other through line is passion for this profession and a dedication to excellence. And importantly, a recognition of the sacrifice, too often the ultimate sacrifice, that so many of our colleagues have made. So we gather tonight to again celebrate that passion, that excellence, and that sacrifice. We are fortunate tonight to hear from 2 journalists who represent all of that and more. Maria Ressa, Nobel Peace Prize laureate and co-founder of the Rappler News Service in the Philippines, is our keynote speaker. And David Remnick, former Moscow correspondent for the Washington Post and editor-in-chief of the New Yorker, is the recipient of the OPC President's Award. Our awards have been dominated by reporting from the previous year's hotspots, and tonight is no different. But I want to draw your attention to a new award category you will hear tonight. Last year, the Overseas Press Club Board created the Continuing Coverage of Conflict Award to recognize exemplary coverage of world conflicts over time, especially those that don't always make the headlines. The first year's winner is Reuters for a great example in its coverage of the Civil War in Sudan. Now, before we get started, I want to warmly thank our dinner sponsors, Citi, Mercedes-Benz, the Associated Press, CNN, the Financial Times, the Fuller Project, the LA Times, the New Yorker, the New York Times, NPR, the Outlaw Ocean Project, and the Washington Post. A very special thanks also to Bloomberg for the wonderful pre-dinner reception and to Reuters, the host of tonight's after-dinner reception. 2 other people I'd like to thank: Patricia Kranz, a former foreign correspondent and the OPC's executive director who celebrates her 10th year with the OPC and whose tireless work makes this evening and all of the work of the OPC possible. Thank you, Patty. And a huge thank you to our awards chair, John Danishevsky, standards editor at the AP, former co-chair of the Pulitzer Board. And of course, thanks to the nearly 100 jurors who selected the work we are honoring here tonight. All of us at the OPC are thrilled to congratulate tonight's winners. One of our most solemn traditions every year is to light a candle to honor journalists who have been killed, imprisoned, or harassed while doing their job. We were reminded of that tradition earlier this week when we learned of the passing of Terry Anderson, the AP Beirut bureau chief, who was held hostage for more than 6 years. And soon after his release in 1992, came to the OPC stage to receive the President's Award. And last year on this stage, we spoke about Evan Gershkovich of the Wall Street Journal. A few weeks ago, we had a sad milestone there too. Evan marked a full year of captivity in Russia. Our candle lighting has special meaning for this past year, which was, as we all know, one of the deadliest on record for journalists. It's my honor to introduce this year's candle lighter. Ayman Mohyeddin from MSNBC has covered the Middle East for more than 2 decades, going back to the war in Iraq, the 2008-2009 Israeli attack on Gaza, and the Arab Spring. I'd like to invite Ayman now to say a few words and do us the honor of lighting the candle this year.
Good evening, everyone. It's a real honor to be here with you. Thank you so much for those comments, Scott, and thank you so much to the board for inviting me. Also, this is a really difficult moment, but probably not for the reason you think. I was asked to speak for 1 minute, and that's really hard for a cable news host to do. But I promise that I will be on time in 1 minute remarks. Joking aside, this is a very difficult time for all of us and so many of us, and I am honored to be here with so many talented journalists doing incredible work all around the world, as we see. I'm also saddened to be here this year, because this year has been particularly difficult for me and for many of the journalists in this room around the world. For more than 200 days, the world has watched the unprecedented killing of Palestinian journalists. And it has been an extremely difficult time watching them do their heroic work. We've seen the killing of Israeli journalists, Lebanese journalists. We've seen governments, both in Israel and Egypt, deny access to journalists from around the world to go do what they do best, to report and show the world and cover what is happening. Against this brutal war, we have seen how Palestinian journalists have done the near impossible. They have continued to report without interruption, so the world can see firsthand what is taking place in Gaza. And so tonight, I light this candle to all the journalists around the world, from Gaza to Ukraine, Mexico to the Philippines, who have been killed, maimed, but never silenced in what they are doing for the world. May their words and images serve as their legacy and a universal reminder to all of us that journalism is not a crime. Thank you.
gather ourselves a moment. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our MC for this evening. Marcus Mabry is Senior Vice President of Digital Editorial and Programming at CNN, and we are proud to say, a former president of the OPC. His long resume, his resume is definitely long. Among other things, he's an author. His books include Twice as Good, Condoleezza Rice, and Her Path to Power. He has held multiple posts at the New York Times and was a foreign correspondent and later chief of correspondence at Newsweek. Take it away, Marcus.
Thank you, Scott. We are all so delighted that you were able to join us here tonight. What an incredibly moving way to begin this evening. It is a hard time. As we often say in our profession, the world is on fire, and you are many of the people and our colleagues who are right now out in the field who help to bring that reality to Americans. And we are very, very grateful for all you do. I am delighted to host the presentation of OPC Awards to the outstanding journalists we will honor this evening, including some of my colleagues at CNN. We will intersperse award presentations with other parts of the program to keep things moving along. Each winner or group of winners has recorded a video describing their work. Following the video, they will come to the stage to receive their award certificate, have their photo taken, and bask in your applause. I will also announce the names of the organizations winning runner-up citations for each award. I'm presenting the awards in the order listed in Dateline magazine. You each have a copy of Dateline at your table, so feel free to follow along. The Hal Boyle Award, sponsored by Norm Pearlstein in honor of his friend Jerry Flint, is for Best Newspaper, News Service, or Digital Reporting from Abroad. The runner-up citation goes to Jerry Shih, Joseph Min, Pranshu Verma, Anant Gupta, Karishma Maharatra, and the staff of the Washington Post for Rising India Toxic Tech. The winners are the staff of the New York Times for their coverage of Israel and Gaza.
We are correspondents for the New York Times, based in Jerusalem.
The Times team told wrenching human stories both from Israel's kibbutzim and Gaza's population centers. It also broke news, revealing that the Israeli government ignored clear intelligence warnings that Hamas was planning an attack. And it revealed that the IDF had no clear plan for defending the country against such an attack, and that the security services failed to detect that Hamas's burgeoning business empire was being used to fund its operations.
Hello, I'm Raja Abdurrahim.
And I'm Patrick Kingsley.
We are correspondents for the New York Times, based in Jerusalem.
And we're part of a team of more than 30 reporters and editors based in Gaza, Israel, the West Bank, and elsewhere, who have contributed to our submission to the OPC Awards.
Amid the ongoing killing, destruction, and human suffering, winning an award is no cause for celebration. Nevertheless, we are honored that our efforts to document the tragedy of what's happened since October have been recognized by the Hal Boyle Award, a prestigious prize for reporting from abroad.
We pay tribute to our colleagues on the ground in Gaza, and we mourn at least 90 journalists killed in Gaza during this war, as well as 2 in Israel and 3 in Lebanon.
Winners, please come up and receive your award. Congratulations. The William Worthy Award, sponsored by Simon and June Lee Center for Global Journalism, is for Best Newspaper, News Service, or Digital Interpretation of International Affairs. The citation goes to the Wall Street Journal staff for China Questions Its Future. Winning the Worthy Award is the staff of the New York Times, the same organization but different journalists, for coverage of Russia and Ukraine. Far from the front lines, the New York Times looked at how the war in Ukraine is transforming Russia. At great personal risk, correspondents ventured deep inside the country to break major stories on the suppression of dissent, the prisoners released to fight on the front lines in Ukraine, Russia's evasion of sanctions, and the profits reaped from the departure of Western companies.
Hello, I'm Valerie Hopkins.
And I'm Anton Troyanovsky.
We are honored to accept the William Worthy Award on behalf of a brilliant group at the New York Times. It spans our correspondents around the world, covering national security and technology, Africa, and the Middle East. It includes members of our investigative team and our graphics department.
We are also proud to accept this award on behalf of our Moscow Bureau. For all of 2023, most of the Bureau was working from outside Russia. We were constantly honing our approach to the tremendous challenge of reporting from abroad. But some of us were also working inside the country. Our courageous photographer Nana Heitman, our intrepid Paris Bureau Chief Roger Cohen, and Valerie.
Reporting in Russia for an American newspaper has become much more complicated since February 2022. Finding a way to scratch beneath the surface without putting interlocutors or ourselves at risk requires careful planning, but we believe that it is vital to tell the story of what's happening on the ground.
That's exactly what our friend and colleague Evan Gershkovich was doing when, in March 2023, he was arrested on assignment in Yekaterinburg. In October, Russian-American journalist Alsu Kramasheva was also arrested on bogus charges. We insist on their immediate release.
Thank you.
Old colleagues. Congratulations. Now on to photography. The Robert Capa Gold Medal for exceptional courage and enterprise is sponsored by Getty Images. The runner-up citation goes to Evgeny Maloletka of the Associated Press for War in Ukraine Rages On. The Robert Capa Award goes to Samar Abu Alouf of the New York Times for Gaza. Despite losing loved ones and being separated from our children, Samar's commitment to bearing witness helped inform the world of the nightmare that became life and death in Gaza.
أنا سمر أبو العوف مصورة صحفية مستقلة من مدينة غزة حيث كنت أعمل مع صحيفة نيويورك تايمز. يشرفني حصولي على هذه الجائزة المهمة لعملي في غزة، ومن الصعب الاحتفال بسبب المأساة المستمرة في وطني واللي بتمنى أني أرجع له قريباً. كان قتل الصحفيين من أكبر التحديات اللي واجهتني أثناء تغطيتي للحرب، بالإضافة للظروف الصعبة من نقص الغذاء والوقود والتنقل بسبب نزوحي من بيتي. اضطريت للنوم في مقعد السيارة الأمامي لمدة 60 يوم، وقمت بتخزين ما أمكن العثور عليه من طعام ووقود في مقعد السيارة الخلفي. ما كان في مكان آمن نهائياً، كنت مستعدة دائماً للنزوح من المكان اللي أنا موجودة فيه اضطراراً للعمل والتنقل في مكان آخر. كان الصراع المستمر بالنسبة لي هو حصولي على الإنترنت والاتصالات. لعدة أيام كانت تنقطع الاتصالات والإنترنت. بحب أقدم شكري وامتناني العميق لصحيفة نيويورك تايمز، لمحرري الصور في صحيفة نيويورك تايمز اللي دعموني وكانوا دائما جنبي بكل قوة، وكانوا يمدوني بالقوة والدعم باستمرار.
Thank you so much. The Olivier Roubaud Award, sponsored by David Ake, honors the best news photography from abroad in any medium. The citation goes to Daniel Barahulak of the New York Times for Ukraine's stolen children. The award goes to Mohammed Salim of Reuters for Gaza, Hell on Earth. Thank you. The Danish Siddiqui Award for Best Feature Photography on an International Theme is sponsored by Reuters. Hannah Reyes Morales of the New York Times gets the citation for Africa Youth. The award goes to Nana Heitman of the New York Times for Putin's Forever War. Heitman's unflinching coverage of the Russian side of the war in Ukraine unveils quiet moments from largely inaccessible places. Her stunning photographs tell the story of a society shrouded in nationalism and secrecy. Her work captures the complexities of daily life under war while delving into the historical legacy that helps sustain it.
Hello, I'm Nana Heitman, and I'm deeply honored to receive the Danish Siddiqui Award for my photographic coverage on Russia for the New York Times. The country my mother once left behind for good and that I called home for the past 6 years has transformed beyond recognition. Reporting in Russia is getting harder and harder, but as the war grinds on and its harsh realities seep into everyday life, we still dare to cover coffins returning home and graveyards filling up. If journalists can't be on the ground, we risk an information gap in one of the major conflicts of our time. And I join my colleagues in the call for Evan Gershkowicz's immediate release. But I would also like to thank the courageous journalists Valerie Hopkins, and Roger Cohen, who have continued to report despite the risks. Together, we navigated this difficult environment, telling those stories. And I extend my gratitude to my editors Mona Boschnak and Gaia Tripoli, who always believed in the significance of our work. Thank you.
The Lowell Thomas Award is for Best Radio, Audio, or Podcast, and is sponsored by Deborah Amos. The citation goes to Ramtin Arablouei, Rund Abdel Fattah, Julie Kane, Tara Neal, and the staff of NPR's Throughline for The Ghost in Your Phone. The award goes to Edar Peralta, Dan Gurma, Jenny Schmidt, Tara Neal, and Ayes Roscoe of NPR for The Sunday Story, a rare look inside locked-down Nicaragua. Peralta takes us on a risk-filled trip to Nicaragua, where foreign journalists have been essentially banned. He gives the listener insight into his exiled family and his personal relationship with his homeland. The piece weaves together the sounds of the country, its people, its music, and his own engaging storytelling. Peralta brings present-day Nicaragua to life while providing historical context for how it came to be what it is today.
By most measures, Nicaragua has become one of the least democratic countries in the Western Hemisphere. That not only means elections are a sham, but that the biggest newsrooms in the country have been shuttered and the vast majority of journalists have been exiled. This story was born out of a stubborn desire to do something basic in journalism, and that's to bear witness. And as my colleagues and I planned on just how we would get in and out of this country, which has jailed journalists and human rights activists and even Catholic bishops, we were told by many that this was going to be impossible. But despite those long odds, NPR always said, bearing witness is important, go for it. We'd like to thank the OPC for recognizing that effort and for not ignoring a country that can be easy to ignore. But really, we want to dedicate this award to the journalists who work in places like Nicaragua without a byline. It's not that they wouldn't want the recognition, that they wouldn't want to sit among you and receive an award like this. It's that they'd be jailed or killed if they stood publicly by their work. And yet, they continue to report because they believe that the work of bearing witness is more important than any recognition. So, to those unnamed, unrecognized journalists, we owe our gratitude. Thank you.
Congratulations. Now we will take a break to enjoy the meal. I will be back in about 20 minutes. Bon appétit. Hello again. Please continue to enjoy your meal, but I will bring in for a little bit more for your attention as we return to the awards. We're going to start now with the David Kaplan Award. The David Kaplan Award for Best TV or Video Spot News is sponsored by ABC News. The citation is awarded to Jane Ferguson, Sarah Just, Morgan Till, Dan Sagalin, and the staff of PBS NewsHour for Deadly Quake. The award goes to CNN Worldwide for Israel-Hamas war. The team at CNN gives us comprehensive and even-handed coverage of the war in Israel and Gaza, providing deep insights from the opening moments of what has turned out to be a lengthy and expanding global crisis. Flooding the zone, the network's bold and determined correspondents, producers, and camera crews provided moving and insightful reports and perspectives, often live and under direct fire, exploring the deepest emotions of Israelis and Palestinians, as well as the dynamics driving all parties in the conflict.
Hi, I'm Nick Robertson, CNN's International Diplomatic Editor. Thank you for considering us for this award, and thank you for honoring us with it. It's a huge privilege. We were part of a big team from CNN that day, October the 7th, coming in. We arrived just a few miles from where I'm standing now. The rockets were flying overhead. We had no idea what was happening around us, and the country and the people of Israel are still in trauma. They still don't know which way this war is going. They still don't know where their safety is coming from. Behind me is the Erez border crossing. Everyone's talking about that as an aid crossing point to Gaza. You can see behind me the hill there in Gaza, the huge suffering as well that's gone on inside of Gaza. And you can't talk about the conflict here and covering the conflict here without thinking of the dozens upon dozens of journalists inside of Gaza who've lost their lives. Their names are not household names, but their video is. It's through them that we're understanding what's happening there. It's through reports that we continue doing that our audience can see and hear from the families of the hostages, hear from what the Israeli government is saying, hear about the conflict. And that's our mission. That day was challenging. The days after were challenging. The house next door to where we were living in Sderot for many months, just over there, was hit by a rocket. Our cameraman was on the roof. We didn't even know if it was okay when it happened. But we're committed, and that's important, I think, for the audience. And it's kind that you've awarded us, but I think it's important, too, that the audience understands that the value of the work that we do. You can hear the gunfire going on behind me, so this is not over, and we're committed to continuing and think about all those who are inside Gaza, all those unknown names, those journalists behind the cameras that are sending us the images today, that are telling us the story inside of what's happening. This is important work. It's powerful. And we thank you for your support. Thank you.
Congratulations. The Edward R. Murrow Award, sponsored by CBS News, is for Best Documentary Under 30 Minutes. The citation goes to Isabel Young, Galeria Kiazan, Daniel Vergara, Sarah Eslami, Jake Perrin, and the staff of Vice News for Inside Iran, What Happened to Iran's Women-Led Uprising. The award goes to Mohammed Sawaf, Ibrahim Al-Atla, Salah Al-Ha, Marwan Al-Sawaf, Aleph Multimedia, and the Al Jazeera Witness Team for Witness, Rescue Mission Gaza. Al Jazeera gives us a close-up depiction of one day in the life of an ambulance driver in Gaza as he navigates the terror and heartbreak of rescuing severely injured people under bombardment. Through this deadly assignment, the journalists remain invisible, with no narration, commentary, or judgment. One of the filmmakers, Marwan al-Sawaf, was killed in Gaza on December 1st. Another, Mohammed Sawaf, was seriously injured in an airstrike that killed 45 members of his family.
مرحبا بكم، أنا محمد الصواف. من خبر سعيد أن نسمع بتكريم هذا العمل وسط كومة الأحزان التي تتراكم فوق رؤوسنا. والموت الذي يخيم علينا ويلاحقنا في كل مكان في قطاع غزة، وتحديدا هنا في شمال قطاع غزة.
صحيح، استهداف منزل لآل عاشور، استهداف منزل لآل عاشور.
في هذا الفيلم استطاع إبراهيم أن ربما يجيب عن سؤال أخلاقي دائما كان يلاحق الصحفيين: إذا وجدت ضحية هل تترك التوثيق ونقل الحدث وتذهب لإنقاذها، أم تكمل توثيق الحدث وتترك المهمة لغيرك؟ إبراهيم استطاع أن يجمع بين الاثنتين، ساهم في إنقاذ الضحية وأكمل توثيقه للحدث، وربما هذا جزء من نقاط القوة في هذا الفيلم.
على وجه سرعة من طرفه. يا وسام.
نحن هنا نوثق القصص ونصنع أفلاما عنها.
شيلوا يلا شيلوا.
عدد كبير من أفراد أسرتي، بينهم أبي وأمي وإخواني الأربعة وأولاد أخي وجزء كبير من أقاربي. أنا الواقف أمامكم أصبت مرتين في هذه الحرب، إحداها أو المرة الأخيرة أقعدتني 8 أسابيع عن الحركة. نحن لا نعتبر أي عمل ممكن أن نعمله ذات جدوى ويستحق التكريم إن لم يتمكن من المساهمة في وقف الظلم الواقع على الإنسان هنا في قطاع غزة وفي أي مكان في العالم. شكرا لكم، ومرة أخرى سعيد بهذا التكريم.
Thank you. The Peter Jennings Award for Best Long-Form Documentary is sponsored by the Jennings family. The citation goes to Martin Smith, Marcela Gaviria, Brian Funk, and Scott Enger of Frontline PBS for America and the Taliban. The winners are Mstislava Chernov, Michelle Meisner, Rainey Aronson-Rath, Daryl McCrudden, and the staffs of Frontline PBS and the Associated Press for 20 Days in Mariupol. A team of fearless AP journalists in Ukraine, led by Mstislav Chernov, risked their lives to show the toll of war during the Russian onslaught, filming and interviewing civilians in hospitals, makeshift bomb shelters, the rubble of buildings, and burial grounds. While the events in this film took place early in the war, the story it tells is just as urgent and relevant today, with Ukraine's plight growing ever more precarious and Russia ever more emboldened.
Thank you for this important recognition. Thanks to my colleagues from Frontline and Associated Press for helping me on this difficult journey, for helping me to make this film and to make sure that it reaches the largest audience possible. It's a difficult time, a time when Ukraine keeps getting bombed, a time when the story of Mariupol is not a story of Mariupol anymore. It's a story of every city that got destroyed and occupied by Russian bombs. And sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough. I know the feeling of every journalist that in a world that is on fire right now, we sometimes feel powerless to change it, to make things better. But at the same time, recognition is this, and the fact that people see our work, people see the pain of people whose stories we're telling, this fact gives me strength. This fact gives me hope that the story of Mariupol will not be forgotten and that our work matters. And one day, the world will be a better place.
Congratulations. The Ed Cunningham Magazine Award is sponsored by Michael S. Cyril. The citation goes to Edward White and Kang Buswang of the Financial Times for A North Korean Love Story. The winner is Heidi Blake of The New Yorker for The Fugitive Princesses. The judges said Blake masterfully weaves together the many pieces and people of this complicated saga of the struggle of 4 royal women to escape their virtual imprisonment by the ruler of Dubai. It is centered on the eternal human desire for freedom and also gives us a glimpse of the international web of surveillance, complicity, and capture that the royal family of the United Arab Emirates was able to deputize even in the comparatively progressive states of the West.
Hi, I'm Heidi Blake from The New Yorker, and I am really sad not to be there with you tonight, but I'm so honored to be counted among such incredibly inspiring company. Thank you so much. This was my very first piece for the magazine, which was a little daunting, and so huge thanks go to my brilliant and hilarious editor, Nick Troutwine, for his flawless judgment, for saving me from my every cliche, and for pouring the whiskey at all the key moments. To Theresa Matthew and Elaine Werner, whose meticulous fact-checking brilliance strengthened this piece in so many ways, and to our dauntless General Counsel, Fabio Bertoni. I'm so grateful to David Remnick for making me so welcome at the magazine and making The New Yorker such an incredibly exciting and inspiring place to do deep investigative reporting. And finally, I must pay tribute to Sheikha Latifa, the extraordinarily courageous daughter of Dubai's ruling emir, who documented the ordeal that she and her female relatives had sought to flee with haunting eloquence in her writings and recordings. I feel deeply honored to have been able to tell her story. Thank you so much and have a wonderful night.
Now we move on to the Best Cartoon Award, sponsored by Mercedes-Benz. The citation goes to Rob Rogers of Andrews McMeel Syndication. The winner is Matt Davies of Newsday. The judges said Matt's portfolio showcased smart and insightful commentaries drawn in a uniquely playful, satirical style. His cartoons use simple, striking images captioned with few words. They employ the wit and charm of his children's book illustrations, teamed with the acumen of his prize-winning journalism.
Hi, I'm Matt Davis, staff editorial cartoonist and editorial board member at Newsday. It's an incredible honor to be recognized here tonight for the cartooning prize. You know, if it wasn't for the journalists, photographers, camera people, toiling in war zones or under brutish authoritarian regimes working at extreme risk to bring the truth of what they're witnessing, then I wouldn't be able to sit here in relative safety to channel the ironies, heartbreak, the horror, cut through the ruthlessly calibrated fog machine of war, to bring some humor and some sense of grounding and hopefully sanity. Newsday, my newspaper, focuses mostly on regional and local issues, but as Senator Pat Moynihan so famously said, all politics are local. Events overseas, Ukraine, Gaza, they're of great importance to our readers on a local level. So thanks to Newsday for having the respect for its audience to have on board this cartoonist who doesn't always tell its readers what they want to hear. I also don't wish to take for granted the freedoms guaranteed to a US cartoonist for now. As in many other countries, my cartooning brothers and sisters find themselves abused, jailed, or exiled for doing the same thing I'm being recognized for so kindly here tonight. My hat is off to the journalists who courageously toil in the most dangerous environments. You give me the raw materials from which I can sculpt my cartoons. Wishing you peace and good luck out there. Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Now Scott will introduce our keynote speaker.
Thanks, Marcus. Our keynote speaker tonight is a journalist whose unwavering commitment to reporting the truth has inspired countless colleagues across the globe to stand up for freedom, freedom of expression, and accountability. Maria Ressa came to the United States at the age of 10 and had to learn English at school in New Jersey. Her high school yearbook profile noted her love for Rocky Horror Picture Show and pigging out, but also her desire to conquer the world. A lot of teenagers probably share that desire. In Maria's case, though, now, a few decades later, I think we can safely put a check mark beside that one. In 2012, she co-founded the online news site Rappler in the Philippines with a staff of a dozen. It quickly became a major multimedia website in that country. Her arrest in 2019 under a new cyber libel law brought international condemnation on the Philippines government. Maria's life and career embody journalistic integrity and bravery. As a journalist, author, and CEO of Rappler, she has held the line against disinformation, state-sponsored harassment, and attempts to silence the free press in the Philippines and beyond. Her groundbreaking work at great personal risk and while facing relentless attacks has been widely recognized, including with the Nobel Peace Prize. She has used that moral authority to champion the critical role of a free press in safeguarding our societies from tyranny and oppression. And she has truly made a difference, for which we owe her our gratitude. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Maria Ressa.
This is the problem when you're short. First, how wonderful to be in the room with you tonight, and how difficult it is to be a journalist today. Scott, I can't believe you dug out Rocky Horror Picture Show. But if you think about it, right, that would have been the meme in our time, you know, when there's a toast and you literally throw a toast, like a bread toast. So interactive meant different things back then. Thank you to the Overseas Press Club for inviting me tonight, and massive congratulations to the winners and the citation recipients. It is so good to see so many friends here. As the candle shows, we are living through extremely dark times that demands so much sacrifice from every journalist, from every one of us. In the Nobel Lecture in 2021, I said that we are standing on the rubble of the world that was. Well, that became literal Actually, in Mstislav's film, there was a woman who caught my eye in it because it was the first time she went back to her home and it was in rubble and she was crying so heartbreakingly in front of her broken home. And she asked, "Can't anybody do anything? They're killing us here." Like someone would listen. Well, that was in Ukraine, but that cry could just as easily have come from Sudan or Gaza, where more than 34,000 people are dead. The challenge today is whether our international rules-based order still works. Too many are getting away with impunity, from countries to companies, and it's dividing us in ways that are literally destroying us, destroying trust. As journalists, we're on the front lines, and when we fail to hold the line, the people we serve lose their rights, their freedoms, their lives. So we are jailed, we're killed, silenced. The number of people jailed in 2023, RSF says nearly 800 journalists went to jail. More than 520 are still in prison today. That includes Evan Gershkovich in Russia, Jimmy Lai in Hong Kong, Frenchie May Cumpio in the Philippines. The journalists killed, it's 44% higher than 2022 because of Gaza. And those silenced, well, so many more novel ways of silencing journalists today, right? When free speech is literally used to stifle free speech. In the Nobel lecture, I said an atom bomb exploded in our information ecosystem when journalists lost our gatekeeping powers to technology companies. And the death toll from that, I would say that happened around 2014, the death toll is still rising. In our first contact with AI, social media turned our world upside down by rewarding lies, amplifying fear, fueling hatred, creating a distribution system that is dangerous to journalists, that doesn't give journalism a chance, right? This outrage economy built on our data, micro-targeting us, has transformed our world. It insidiously manipulates not just us, but the audience, the public we serve. It ignites the worst of who we are, fueling our blackest emotions. These next 3 sentences I've said over and over and over, and I'll repeat them again. Without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these three, we have no shared reality, no rule of law, no democracy. Journalists, human rights defenders, anyone under attack, we're defenseless against this information warfare because that is what it is, and at this time, the greed for profit and authoritarians using this technology to consolidate power, well, they align, makes it harder for us to do our work. Generative AI, launched November 2022, triggered another arms race and the failure of democratic governments to hold tech companies in check, the least regulated globally, to put laws in place to protect the public. Each day of impunity means these governments lose more power. It's a tech coup in plain sight. And like social media, LLMs or large language models, they're not anchored in facts. They spew lies. This time they use a chatbot and it's called hallucinations. They sound like facts, but they're not. And it is about to get worse, right? You've heard the phrase, the enshittification of the internet. It's not a coincidence that 71% of the world today lives under autocratic rule. Globally, we are electing illiberal leaders democratically. Because if we don't have integrity of facts, we cannot have integrity of elections. And in this tipping point year for democracy, where half of the world is about to vote, Americans will vote in November, you will have far less safety measures in place in the technology that rules our information ecosystems. It's almost like we went to the basement. It is far less than in 2020, and certainly far less than 2016. That means people will get less news in their feeds. They'll get more propaganda, more information operations to push their emotional buttons. They will have to struggle for agency. So what do we do as journalists? I'm not going to leave you completely depressed, okay? For the news heads who are here, the managers of the news, we have a year or two, if you're looking at digital news, where we must think of something new, and it is existential. There are only 3 ways a news website gets traffic. It's direct, social, or search. As of last January, last year, Meta has choked traffic to news websites. Again, less news in those feeds, more propaganda, more information operations with generative AI, more deep fakes, yay. Search, LLMs are out. The SGE, Search Generative Experience, is built on top of search, meaning at a certain point, this has been rolled out in 125 different countries, at a certain point, you will type in your question and you will not get a link back to your website. So we need to prepare because news, journalism must survive. So we have to keep working. We have to build tech. This sounds crazy to tell a room full of journalists. We must again own our distribution. We need to tell heartbreaking, we've seen them, but also heartwarming stories. We need to remind people about the goodness of human nature because they see so little of it on their social media, about the kindness of strangers. I wouldn't be standing in front of you today if it wasn't for that. People who at the very last minute opened the box, the cashier, so I could post bail. Otherwise, I would have had to stay, I would have been arrested over a 3-day weekend. People who I didn't know helping us survive. The parts of our humanity that technology strips away. We live in existential times, and what you do now matters. So, the war isn't happening in just Ukraine, in Sudan, in Gaza. It isn't happening out there. It's happening here. Each of us fighting our own battles for facts, for integrity, because the dictator-to-be can zoom in and target the cellular level of our democracy, each of us. So what do we organize? We collaborate. We find new forms, find new partnerships, tell our communities the whys. Why is it happening? Our imagination and creativity must spark the empathy, so crucial to get us through these dark times. Power and money is not enough. Let's prove it and prove that inspiration ignites the good in each of us. For all of you out there, the working journalist, keep doing, keep going. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Now, Marcus will introduce more awards.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Maria. I think, thank you for laying out those very stark realities. And I think a lot of us live them every day. And I think if you have not given up, given everything you've been through personally and professionally, then none of us have a right to either. So thank you for those words and that call to action. Now back to the awards. The Malcolm Forbes and Martin Frank Award for Best International Business News Reporting in Any Medium is sponsored by Forbes magazine. The citation goes to Spencer Woodman, Neil Weinberg, Delphine Reuter, David Kinner, Matai Raska, and the staff of the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists for Cyprus Confidential. The winner is Miles Johnson of the Financial Times for Wagner Inc., the criminal empire of Yevgeny Prigozhin. Despite repeated threats, Financial Times investigative reporter Miles Johnson plumbed the depths of Yevgeny Prigozhin's Wagner Inc. business empire. Johnson's reporting exposed how Western lawyers and other professionals helped the late Russian criminal known as Putin's chef evade international sanctions. Johnson also illuminated how mercenary forces pillaged Africa and Ukraine, looting, raping, torturing, committing arson, and murdering many, including journalists.
Hi, I'm Miles Johnson, and I'm an investigative reporter with the Financial Times based in London. I'm hugely honored to have received the OPC's Malcolm Forbes and Morton Frank Award this year. Thank you so much to the Overseas Press Club of America and the judges. I'd also like to thank my colleagues at the Financial Times who made these stories possible. Jeff Dyer expertly edited the stories, and the work of our media lawyer, Nigel Hansen, was invaluable. Thank you too to Paul Murphy and the FT's editor, Rula Calaf, and especially to Karina Weidman. Thank you.
Congratulations. We are pleased to announce the winners of an award that is new this year, the Continuing Coverage of Conflict Award for Best Reporting on a Continuing International Conflict or Crisis in Any Medium, sponsored by the Simon and June Lee Center for Global Journalism. The citation goes to Siegfried Madola of the Globe and Mail for On the New Front Line in Myanmar. The winners are Maggie Michel, El Tayyib Sadiq, Ryan McNeil, Zora bin Simra, Khalid Abdelaziz, Naftisa El Tahir, Aidan Louis, and the staff of Reuters for Slaughter in Sudan. While much of the world's attention focused on the wars in Gaza and Ukraine, this Reuters series bore witness to a systematic massacre in Sudan that has gone largely unreported. Trenchant, moving, and deeply probing, the series lays bare how one side in Sudan's civil war unleashed a campaign of ethnic slaughter against the Masalit people of West Darfur.
My name is Maggie Michel, a member of Reuters Enterprise team that won the OPC Award for last year's investigations about the war crimes committed in Darfur against the Masalit people by the Rapid Support Forces. I would like to give thanks to our Enterprise editor, Peter Hirschberg, for his huge support, and to members of Reuters, reporters and editors who put a lot of effort in this project. I would like to take this opportunity to remind of Sudan's forgotten war, especially as famine is knocking at the door. This war has left 9 million people in displacement. Without media attention, there will be no international pressure to stop the fighting. Thank you.
Congratulations, thank you. The Cornelius Ryan Award is for Best Nonfiction Book on International Affairs. The citation goes to Robert D. Kaplan for The Loom of Time, Between Empire and Anarchy from the Mediterranean to China, published by Penguin Random House. The winner is Paul Caruana Galizia for A Death in Malta, published by Riverhead Books at Penguin Random House. Caruana Galizia has written an outstanding biography of his mother, Daphne, a Maltese journalist assassinated by a car bomb for exposing pervasive government corruption in the island nation. She was 53. In the wake of her murder, Paul became an investigative journalist himself, producing a meticulously reported and highly readable account of his mother's life. He builds upon his mother's investigative work into Malta's corruption and joins, along with his two brothers, the hunt for her killers. The three sons also successfully appealed for an international campaign to expose Maltese wrongdoing. Judges said the book is a clarion call to journalists and nations to step up when they witness the corruption of democratic institutions, the spread of disinformation, and the subversion of the rule of law.
I'm Paul Caruana Galizia, and I'm the author of A Death in Malta, which was published in the US by Riverhead. The book's subtitle is An Assassination and the Family's Quest for Justice. The family is mine, and the victim is my mother, Daphne, a journalist who, towards the end of her life, reported on the political corruption that brought Malta, the EU's smallest member state, to its knees. But I wrote this book because I felt her murder was becoming bigger than her life, and I really wanted to introduce people to her before she was lost again. So I thank her, and I thank my family for all their help and patience over the writing of this book. I thank my editors, Becky Salatin and Helen Comfort, for all their wisdom and their support. And I thank my agent, Patrick Walsh, for starting this whole thing. And I also thank, of course, the Overseas Press Club, particularly the judges of the Cornelius Ryan Award, for recognizing A Death in Malta.
Congratulations, Paul. The Madeleine Dane Ross Award, sponsored by Linda Fasulo, is for Best International Reporting in print or digital, showing a concern for the human condition. The winner is Krithika Varagar of Harper's Magazine for Love in the Time of Sickle Cell Disease, What's the Cost of Rolling the Genetic Dice? A powerful testament to love and family, this story forces readers to wrestle with a question that most people never have to consider. What if nearly a third of the population were romantically off limits because of their blood? This gripping love story from Nigeria, known as the sickle cell disease capital of the world, shows what happens when universal human longings are entangled with governments, genetics, ethics, and cold medical truths.
Hi, my name is Krithika Varagor, and I've been a member of the OPC for 8 years. I have all the battered ID cards to show for it. And as a millennial, it's been the longest professional affiliation of my life. So I want to thank the OPC for stewarding over the kind of journalism that is being recognized here tonight. It's really surreal to get one of these awards for my story, Love in the Time of Sickle Cell Disease, for Harper's Magazine. And I'd like to thank a number of people who made it happen. Above all, my editor at Harper's and great friend, Elena Savitra-Buckley, and my wonderful and patient fact-checker, Maya Perry. I'd also like to thank the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting, which has supported me for a number of years and allowed me to report from Nigeria 3 times for this story. And finally, I would like to thank the dozens of Nigerians who spoke with me for my reporting, sharing the most intimate details of their lives. Above all, Nkechi Mabogunje and her son Momo, who have an incredible story that it was simply my privilege to be able to share.
The David A. Andelman and Pamela Tittle Award, sponsored by David and Pamela, is for Best International Reporting in the Broadcast Media, showing a concern for the human condition. The citation goes to Adam Desiderio, Ben C. Solomon, Julia Kochetova, Drew Pattison, Craig Thompson, and the staff of Vice News and Tubi for City Under Fire Inside the War in Ukraine. The winners are Layla Hussein and the staff of Bloomberg News for Run for Your Life, the murder that shook the running world. In September 2021, Kenyan runner Agnes Tirop broke the women's 10,000-meter world record. Just 5 weeks later, she was dead. In a year-long investigation, Bloomberg gained access to hundreds of pages of court documents, as well as Tirop's family and friends, to recount her tragic story. Visually stunning and thoughtfully reported, Bloomberg effectively documented the widespread issue of gender-based violence against runners and questioned what more can be done by governing bodies and the sports brands that benefit from the success of these female athletes.
Waking up one morning in 2021 to the news that Agnes Tirop had been killed not only struck me, but an entire nation. Agnes was a world record holder and one of Kenya's most exciting long-distance runners. I felt compelled to find out why her husband, who was also her coach, had murdered her. I want to thank Robert Friedman and David Malinga for editing and believing in this story, and Joan Chalima with Tirop's Angels for her support and patience in accessing the community in Eden. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the OPC for this award. It means so much to the entire team who worked on it, including editor Chris McElveen, executive producer Neville Gillett, and We Are Not the Machine in Kenya. Because of gender-based violence, Agnes Tirop couldn't be in this documentary. So we followed the women carrying her legacy forward at Tirop's Angels, and I'd like to dedicate this award to them, their courage and their resilience.
I now invite Scott back to the stage to present the President's Award.
Thanks, Marcus. Each year, it is our privilege to recognize one of our colleagues for exceptional contributions to international journalism. Past recipients of the OPC President's Award have included Washington Post publisher Katharine Graham, New York Times editor Bill Keller, South Africa's courageous Donald Woods, the AP's Kathy Gannon, and last year, Christian Amanpour of CNN. Tonight, it's our pleasure to recognize David Remnick, the editor of The New Yorker, and a journalist whose career exemplifies, simply put, the best in our profession. David began his career stringing for a local paper, followed by an internship with the Washington Post. He went on to a posting for the paper in Moscow, where he wrote his first book, Lenin's Tomb, The Last Days of the Soviet Empire, a seminal work on the Soviet Union that won a Pulitzer Prize. He became editor of The New Yorker in 1998, where he built on that publication's long tradition of excellence and expanded its reach and influence. He is a gifted editor, yes, but he's also a mentor, and he has discovered and nurtured some of the finest journalists of our generation. Thankfully for all of us, he also has continued to write the kind of insightful, compelling, and meticulously reported pieces that set a gold standard for the rest of us. David is truly a guiding light in our profession, and I'm so pleased to welcome him to the stage to receive this year's Overseas Press Club President's Award.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Now, modesty, usually false, is a convention of public speaking, particularly when it involves the acceptance of an award. Whether one has won the Best Supporting Actress Award or the Passaic County Periodontist of the Year Award, it's imperative to pay tribute to the other nominees, thank the Academy, and appear modest before all the other periodontists. But tonight, I hope you'll believe me, and I pray you do, that my modesty is neither routine nor artificial. I'm not always like this. When I won the 1973 Lake Owego Summer Camp foul shooting contest, I did so on the merits. 43 for 50 from the stripe. Tonight is something different. When I say that I'm not deserving of the Overseas Press Club Awards good graces, I mean it. Maria Ressa, Nobel laureate, David Remnick, selector of talking dog cartoons. I was once a foreign correspondent, a real one, the kind without a parachute or a return ticket. But it was a long time ago, and for a relatively brief period and in a relatively pacific period. It was the era of Gorbachev. I spent a fascinating 4 years in the late Soviet Union during an extended period of reform that was sometimes called the Moscow Spring. This was a charmed interregnum of promise and safety, particularly for the foreign press. It came after Nick Davidoff of U.S. News and World Report had been imprisoned on a phony espionage charge, and long before Evan Gershkovich, a brilliant reporter for the Wall Street Journal, was arrested on an equally preposterous espionage charge. My wife, Esther Fine, and I, she wrote for the New York Times, I for the Post, and all of my other colleagues in Moscow, we had no illusions. We were being bugged by the KGB. Our local employees went to a weekly meeting to tell all the fascinating things that we were doing that week. And yet the only two occasions that I ever entered Lubyanka, the great headquarters of the secret police, was the first time was to interview the first and last Miss KGB, an attempt at the warming spirit by the secret police of the Soviet Union. The second time was a few nights after the fall of the Communist Party in August of 1991, when I was invited at midnight into Lubyanka prison to interview the new head of the Moscow KGB, who explained to me in great deal all the democratic reforms that would come to the secret police. I'm not sure which was more illusory, the dismantlement plan or Miss KGB. So I was lucky, which is why I accept this award with a modesty that borders on embarrassment. Subsequent forays to Chechnya, the West Bank, Gaza, and elsewhere in coming years were also, compared to the exploits of the people we honor tonight, fleeting and mild. One of my favorite foreign correspondents of all time was A.J. Liebling, whose reporting from the beaches of Normandy and the liberation of Paris for The New Yorker led to the most thrilling dispatches since Herodotus was a stringer covering the Battle of Marathon. The one thing I have in common with Liebling, besides a common publication, is that our years abroad were distinctly limited. And his expression of modesty, of somewhat pre-modern and distinctly politically incorrect, stands for my own. He wrote, "There is an old proverb that a woman may sleep with one man without being a trollop, but let a man cover one little war and he is a war correspondent." I belong, he said, to the one war category. Prior to October 1938, this is Liebling obviously, I'm old but not that old. Prior to October 1938, my only friends were prize fighters, seconds, romance philologists, curators of tropical fish, bail bondsmen, press agents for professional wrestlers, and horse clockers. Like you, I don't know what a horse clocker is. But Liebling was, in other words, a feature writer, a generalist who had once in his youth been lucky enough to have been sent abroad and survived the experience. When I consider the hardships and dangers faced by my true foreign correspondent heroes, Orwell in Spain, Martha Gellhorn and Janet Flanner in Europe, John Hersey in Hiroshima, Maria Ressa in Philippines, Bernard Fall, Michael Hare, Francis Fitzgerald in Vietnam, and young stars like Patricia Evangelista and Susie Hansen, and so many more. I am humbled by their courage, their skill, and their persistence. Every time I've encountered the real thing, I've been moved to the point of real reverence. During the Second Intifada, I arrived with a photographer in the West Bank city of Jenin. There had been a great battle. The streets were abandoned. Stores were shuttered. Everything was still. Everything was quiet. People were terrified for their lives and taking shelter in their homes. Israeli tanks ringed the city. Many Palestinians had already been killed. Garbed in a borrowed Kevlar vest and helmet that was so perched on the top of my head and so ill-fitting that they marked me for the tyro that I still was, I heard a woman whisper theatrically, "Get out of the street, you fool." The accent was American. I saw that this woman had set up in an alley a kind of makeshift mini Jenin bureau. She wore an eye patch, a souvenir from when she had been wounded covering the civil war in Sri Lanka. This was, of course, Marie Colvin of the Sunday Times. She had given everything of herself to the war, and the eye was just a prelude to greater sacrifice. A decade later, I sat in my warm living room, distinctly undangerous, watching on CNN as Marie covered the Syrian bombardment of the city of Homs. In her long career, she told Anderson Cooper, in the moment, this was the worst shelling she had ever experienced. A couple of hours later, she was dead, targeted, it seemed, by the Syrian army. All of us in this room know colleagues who have died while doing this work. We all know fixers and translators who have suffered terrible. Others have been imprisoned or taken hostage. And under my own roof, whenever John Lee Anderson or Luke Mogelson, Masha Gessen, Dexter Filkins, Josh Yaffa, Ben Tao, Alexis Acuello, whenever they are out in what is politely called the field, an absurdly pastoral description, I cannot wait for them to be home. The friends and colleagues whom we have lost over the years paid what is called, in the cliche, the ultimate price. But we should not doubt that the cost to the living, the people who survive it all so far, can also be grave. PTSD is a slippery, unpredictable bastard that appears in many guises and at any time. I'm particularly and latterly humbled and saddened and outraged by what we've seen these past months in Gaza. Nearly 100 Palestinian journalists have been killed while trying to record and describe the catastrophe there. I too want to pay special tribute and extend my deepest gratitude to Mossab Abu Toa, a poet of Gaza, who during the worst of the bombing this year became a foreign correspondent out of circumstance, writing a series of remarkable dispatches, including the ones he did for us that are being honored here tonight. So I send love to Mossab and his family tonight, who are in Cairo. Reporters understand their mission, or the best of them absolutely do. The duty of editors is not only to support those reporters materially and spiritually and more, it's our duty, to the best of our ability, to ignore what is so politely called the metrics, to meet seeming indifference to the affairs of the world beyond our borders with an ever more powerful commitment to publishing and airing foreign news with depth, imagination, and a sense that it matters. When I first arrived in the Soviet Union, countless people told me that in the days of ironclad censorship under communist rule, the only way they knew the truth about the world was through news reports that had been in the New York Times, and the Washington Post, and other such outlets that were then read in Russian or Georgian or Kazakh or whatever over the Voice of America and Radio Liberty. Now, in an era when authoritarianism and inevitably censorship is unbelievably, ineluctably on the rise, we are likely to see that phenomenon again, if only through new technological means. And so even as business models are challenged and attention spans wander, our responsibility hardly diminishes. It grows. It is immense. And this is essential. Our reporting, our work is not foremost a business. It is a cause. This is why I am so proud to be here tonight among you, and with more humility than I think you can imagine. Yes, I was a short-lived, okay foreign correspondent and an occasional subsequent parachute artist. But you are the real thing. You honor the cause, and my gratitude to you is everlasting. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Marcus, please join us to present the last group of awards.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, David. The Joe and Lori Dine Award for the Best International Reporting in Any Medium Dealing with Human Rights is sponsored by Philip Dine. The citation goes to Mayed Nessi, Sasha Joel Achili, James Alnut, and Dan Edge of Frontline PBS for Inside the Iranian Uprising. The winners are Isabel Young, Maya Rostovska, Daniel Vergara, Katerina Malifieva, Sean Stevens, and the staff of Vice News for Stealing Ukraine's Children. The Vice team produced a chilling, indelible film about one of the most wrenching human rights abuses of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the transfer of thousands of Ukrainian children to Russian-controlled territory. Granted rare access to a camp for Ukrainian children inside Russia, Vice takes viewers inside an Orwellian tableau of military uniforms and patriotic songs, interviewing children who have become unwitting spoils of the conflict. In a remarkable exchange with the Russian official behind the program, Isabel Young lays bare the disinformation and cynicism behind the invasion. The judges said, "This is video journalism at its bravest, and stands out amid all the powerful reporting about the war."
Hi guys, it's Isabel Young here, formerly from Vice News. We are so incredibly honored to be receiving this Overseas Press Club Award, particularly I think at a time when the world feels pretty unstable, the media landscape definitely feels very unstable, and so I think receiving an award like this for an investigative conflict story goes so far and means so much to everyone who poured their heart and soul into making this. And I think it's just the boost that we all needed right now, so thank you. Wanted to mention some of those people by name. Maya Rostovska, whose dedication has been unwavering throughout this entire process. Sean Stevens and Craig Thompson, whose support from the exec side of things has been amazing, and we would not have got the story over the line without you guys and your incredibly smart insights. Some of our Russian colleagues we can't name because of security reasons, but some of them we can, including Nastya Archen, Veronika Silchenko, Katya Malufeva, Sergei Mokalyants. All of your work has been so crucial in getting the story seen and heard, and I'm so grateful to have got the opportunity to work with each and every one of you. Thank you.
Congratulations. The Vice team couldn't be here tonight. The Whitman Basel Environmental Award is sponsored by Robert Sirio. The citation goes to the staff of the Washington Post for The Human Limit. The award also goes to the staff of Reuters for Batlands. This astonishing series explores the potential threats to human health lurking silently in bat populations around the world. In a tour de force of graphics presentations, narrative writing, data analysis, and on-the-ground reporting on 6 continents, the reporters were able to draw a connection between many of the environmental problems the world faces and the risk of life-threatening disease. Their reporting shows how things like mining, deforestation, over-farming, and urban sprawl are unleashing bats from the remote quarters that have historically inhabited and putting them into perilous new contact with humans or with animal species directly connected to humans. The result is eye-opening, convincing, and terrifying. Truly an environmental story of our time.
I'm Ryan McNeil from Reuters. I'm part of an international team of data journalists, correspondents, designers, photographers, and editors who worked through the pandemic to produce the Batlands. As the world was still reeling from COVID-19, we wanted to show where and why future pandemics were brewing and how they might be prevented. First, we surveyed the science. Most human viruses originate in the wild, an event known as spillover. And the deadliest viruses to emerge in the last half century are linked to bats. So we mapped 95 past outbreaks, compiled billions of data points from satellites, and developed a machine learning model to help us identify environmental conditions that increase the risk of spillover. We found a growing number of places worldwide are at high risk. 1.8 billion people reside in these areas. Then we put boots on the ground in 6 continents, working around COVID travel restrictions and illnesses to understand the human dynamics. Public health experts said our analysis helped pinpoint where to focus prevention. Our team thanks Reuters for the resources, the scientists who lent their expertise, the extraordinary people who shared their stories, and the Overseas Press Club for this honor.
Congratulations. The Robert Spears Benjamin Award for reporting on Latin America is sponsored by Lori Hayes. The citation goes to Julie Turkovitz and Federico Rios of the New York Times for profiting off migrants. The winners are Drazen Jurgic, Diego Ore, Jackie Botts, Sarah Kinosian, and Stephen Eisenhammer of Reuters for Mexico Narcotics. In a breathtakingly comprehensive series, the Reuters team illustrates the evolution of Mexico-based drug trafficking into a vast fentanyl empire that kills thousands of Americans and rots Mexico's already fragile institutions, from the presidency to the army to the remittance financial system. The reporters make meticulous and exhaustive use of freedom of information laws and data-based graphics. They venture into the compounds of the Sinaloa cartel at great personal risk, and into often impenetrable boardrooms of financial institutions that turn a blind eye to the flow of cartel profits through their accounts.
My name is Drazen Jurgic, and I'm recording this message also on behalf of my Reuters colleagues in the Mexico Bureau, Diego Ore, Jackie Botts, Sarah Kinosian, and Stephen Eisenhammer. In recent years, the devastation wrought by the drug trafficking trade has escalated to its bloodiest level in history on both sides of the US-Mexico border, as murders and overdose deaths have skyrocketed. For this series, our reporting focused on exposing the shifting ways trafficking groups are making and moving money, the key reason why they have accrued such enormous power. We combined dangerous fieldwork in places such as Sinaloa, where we met with traffickers and their accomplices, along with FOIA requests, data analysis, and patient source building. This work would have been impossible without our editors, Christian Plum, Marla Dickerson, Frank Jack Daniel, Claudia Parsons, Alex Friedman, and Mike Williams. I would also like to thank Thomas Bravo, Alessandro Meneghini, Quetzalin Nicteja, Brian Schneider, Alberto Fajardo, Corinne Perkins, Gillian Kumagai, and other photography colleagues, as well as the graphics and arts team, John Emerson, Travis Hartman, Catherine Tai, Julia Wolf. Finally, I would like to thank the OPC judges, as well as the many sources, stringers, and fixers in Mexico, whose names we haven't revealed, and who took real personal risks to bring these stories to light. Thank you all.
Congratulations. The Kim Wall Award for Creative Digital Storytelling is sponsored by ProPublica. The citation goes to Isabel Kian, Pablo Robles, Rumsey Taylor, and Yi Kai of the New York Times for 7 months inside an online scam labor camp. The winners are Renata Brito and Felipe Dana of the Associated Press for Adrift. The AP series follows a single boat full of migrants on a journey from Africa to Europe that went wrong and ended tragically in the Caribbean. The boat capsizes and many are drowned. This moving story tells the tale of the dead and the survivors. The visuals are stunning, the writing is beautiful and poignant. These migrants are as invisible in death as they were in life, but even ghosts have families. This was an investigation that didn't read like one. It is emotional and powerful and deeply compelling and should go down as a classic of the form.
I'm Renata Brito.
And I'm Felipe Dana. We're journalists with the Associated Press.
We're honored to have Adrift recognized here at the OPC. When we started looking into this case, we had no idea this would end up being a nearly 2-year-long investigation. Despite alarming and growing numbers worldwide, the issue of missing migrants is so often overlooked. In every corner of the globe, there are families desperate for answers, and there are also tens of thousands of unidentified bodies that could belong to their loved ones.
When authorities fail to provide these families with answers, journalism can shed a light on what really happened, and in some cases, even bring closure to these families. We want to thank our editors at the Associated Press for believing in this project from the beginning, and our talented colleagues who contributed to making Adrift a truly visual investigation.
But above all, we want to thank the families who trusted us with their story.
Congratulations. The Roy Royan Award for Best Investigative Reporting is sponsored by his son, Marcus. The citation goes to Zachary R. Mider and Bloomberg News staff for bad medicine. The winners are Ian Urbina, Joe Galvin, Maya Martin, Susan Ryan, and the staff of the Outlaw Ocean Project for The Crimes Behind the Seafood You Eat, published in The New Yorker. The result of 4 years of daring, sometimes dangerous reporting, this sweeping investigation exposes the ruthless measures China uses to create the world's largest commercial fishing fleet. Now, the undisputed superpower of seafood, China's fishing industry, as revealed here, is essentially a criminal enterprise, widely dependent on captive deckhands, illegal fishing, and state-sponsored forced labor. Clandestine interviews by outlaw ocean journalists on the high seas and in Chinese processing centers give us a chilling view of how China maintains its position atop a world industry whose products often end up on the tables of American consumers. Picked up by media around the world and translated into other languages, this investigation triggered outrage and calls for reform from human rights organizations and the United States Congress.
Thank you first and foremost to the Overseas Press Club. This is a huge honor. Secondly, I'd like to thank the tiny team that is the Outlaw Ocean Project. This is such a small team that virtually our entire staff is gathered around one table here at tonight's event. This reporting took 4 grueling years to produce. It involved months at sea, climbing aboard Chinese vessels, interviewing workers, sometimes in dangerous conditions, stalking ports in 5 countries, and sifting through impossible amounts of trade data and open source footage from inside Chinese factories. I'd also really like to thank The New Yorker for trusting us to bring this journalism under its tent and making it so much better, and also showing the collaborative spirit to let us publish with dozens of foreign venues so that we could ensure it had the most impact. Thanks again.
Congratulations. The last award of the evening, the Flora Lewis Award for Best Commentary, is sponsored by Mark Limke. The citation goes to Masha Gessen of The New Yorker for Inside the Israeli Crackdown on Speech and In the Shadow of the Holocaust. The winner is Masab Abu Taha of The New Yorker for 3 essays on Gaza. Judges said his essay, A Palestinian Poet's Perilous Journey Out of Gaza, takes readers on a harrowing odyssey through a besieged enclave experiencing wide-scale death, destruction, and humanitarian collapse. With his poet's gift of sparse, measured words, notably absent of vitriol, he calmly recounts the Israeli bombing of his family home, the deaths of extended family members, and his own temporary detention, interrogation, and beating as a suspected Hamas terrorist.
Hello, my name is Musab Abu Toha, and I write for The New Yorker. It is my great honor to win OPC's Flora Lewis Award for my first 3 pieces published in The New Yorker between October 2023 and January 2024. I wrote the first 2 pieces in the streets of Jabalia refugee camp under the Israeli bombing, where my parents and siblings and their children remain starved and bombed every day. I wrote the 3rd long piece about my horrific journey outside of Gaza, partly in the south, before finishing it in Cairo, where I remain exiled with my wife and 3 children. My thanks go to my editor at The New Yorker, Daniel Gross, for his brilliant edits, and to David Remnick for giving me this platform. Thank you so much.
Laura Lewis, David Rumnick, and Abu Toa. It's pretty great names together. That's the end of our award ceremony. Citation winners who are here tonight, please make your way to the head table down here to pick up your certificate. And I now turn it back to Scott. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. Please enjoy the after party hosted by Reuters in the reception area, and good night.